Welcome to our event today. We'll give you a couple of minutes to settle down, and then I will introduce our speakers for tonight. As you're listening to their conversation, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A icon you will see at the bottom of the screen. If time permits, we will get to those questions at the end of the session, depending on how session goes. So no promises, but feel free to ask either LeVar or Jesmyn any questions that you may have. The people are still joining. I can see the numbers go up, so we'll just wait for a couple more minutes since I just opened the vertical doors into our digital meetup event. I hope everyone is doing well and everyone is safe and healthy. All right, let's get started. I'm Padmasree Warrior. I'm the founder and CEO for Fable. Welcome to our very first virtual event for LeVar Burton's Book Club. I actually feel kind of redundant being here introducing two people that really don't need any introduction, but I will do that anyway. I'm thrilled to have the one and only LeVar Burton as part of our Fable community. LeVar, as most of you know, has dedicated his life to bringing the power of storytelling to people of all ages. We're very lucky to have him as he's sharing his personal book recommendations and insights with all of us in his book club on Fable. Personally, I enjoy reading in LeVar's book club. As you all know, from Roots to Reading Rainbow to Star Trek: The Next Generation, LeVar has been captivating all of us around the world for over 40 years with his authentic charm and passion for storytelling. He's an accomplished producer, director, podcaster, just a great human being. I can always count on LeVar to pick the best stories, and I encourage all of you to check out his book recommendations in Fable Folio and join LeVar Burton's Book Club if you're already not a member. Super easy. Basically, you go to fable.co/LeVar. It's that easy. And we're currently reading The Fire This Time, a collection of essays edited by our second guest, the great author, Jesmyn Ward. Jesmyn received her MFA from the University of Michigan, and she's currently a professor of creative writing at Tulane University. She's the author of the novels Where the Line Bleeds and Salvage the Bones, which won the 2011 National Book Award. And she also wrote Sing Unburied Sing, which won the 2017 National Book Award. Jesmyn is also the author of the memoir, Men We Reaped, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. So without further ado, I will now turn off my video and exit right and leave the stage to LeVar and Jesmyn to have this great conversation. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Padma. Very, very much. Really appreciate you. This is the first book club event that we have had. Jesmyn, I am so happy that you have agreed to spend some time with us in this virtual space tonight. But before we begin, I know that you live in the New Orleans area in Mississippi, and I know that you know your family was greatly impacted by Ida. So how are you all doing?
We're okay. I mean, I think that we had some, PTSD issues because of the memory of Katrina and how traumatic that experience was for all of us, because we didn't evacuate for Katrina. So when we saw how rapidly the storm was strengthening, we decided to evacuate. And this is the first time that we've ever evacuated, but we decided to evacuate. And so we came out to Florida, and we tried to go as far east as we could so the storm would just miss us. But we still got some of the outer bands here. We're in Destin, Florida.
Yeah, you drove?
So Yeah, we drove. We were on the road for like, normally it's like a 3.5 hour drive. It took us 7 hours, I think.
The roads are just
and that's what, right, finding our own back roads. But I mean, I can't even use the word, just say luckily. I can just say like, my particular, town and, the Mississippi Gulf Coast didn't experience as much devastation from this storm as it did, during Katrina, and really like Louisiana and New Orleans, right, really bore the brunt of it this time. So I don't know. I mean, we're all safe. We're all alive.
Yes.
We're all as well as we can, be. But I really feel for the people of, New Orleans and Louisiana and Laplace because we know what it's like what it's like to go through such a traumatic experience and then have to rebuild, sometimes from scratch. So
it's not easy. And so, we surround everybody impacted with love, because we've all been through so much this past year and a half. It's been a couple of years since we've seen each other. We met for the first time in New Orleans. And I remember at that time, I was really trying to encourage you to, because I feel like your writing is so visual, Jesmyn. Remember I was saying, would you ever consider screenplay writing? And I know that you've got a lot going on in your world and in your life, but have you given that any thought at all?
I mean, I have thought about it. I have been thinking about it. But I have to be honest and share that. So I have been working on my most recent novel for 2015.
Yes.
2015. So I didn't have a rough draft yet. And so really what has consumed me in the past, 2 years is finally finishing a rough draft. So normally my rough drafts do not take this long because, I'm writing a novel where the protagonist is an enslaved woman, right, who is sold south in 1835, right? So that's unlike anything that I've ever written before. And it just took me a long time. And then, then you add 2020 into that equation, right? And now 2021 pandemic, and and we had a pretty bad hurricane that hit last year, Hurricane Zeta, that caused a lot of damage.
I was there. I was in New Orleans for Zeta. I was there for Zeta.
You were?
I was there for Zeta.
Yeah, it was rough. Mississippi Gulf Coast, it was rough. So I've been devoting all of my time to just finishing a rough draft. So at the beginning of this summer, in like the first week of June, I finished a rough draft. So now I'm at that place where I have to read the rough draft, go through, and then begin to figure out what I'm going to revise, right? I need to make my list of revisions. And then I need to dive into that. And I haven't begun yet. I was going to begin last week, and then this happened. So it just, it made it difficult for me to concentrate. But because I've just been really working on that novel. But I am interested in writing for the screen.
I just know you will excel at it. Speaking for your fans, we will be patient as long as it takes for you to do what it is you need to do. We are standing at the ready. No pressure. You do your thing, and we will read it when you're done. All right? Okay.
All right.
Can we talk about the fire this time a little bit? Because I was sharing with Jesmyn, y'all, this is my first book club. I've never had a book club before. When Padmasree and her team at Fable invented this technology that enables me to spend time in the same space with people who are disposed to want to hear what recommendations I want to give them to read. I jumped at the opportunity because the technology just didn't exist before. And I'm so happy to be able to share space with people who love the written word as much as I do. Got a couple of questions here for you about the essays. But let's begin with the introduction, right? Okay. That you write. And you say in the introduction, all of these essays give me hope. I believe there is power in words, power in asserting our existence, our experience, our lives through words, that sharing our stories confirms our humanity, that it creates community, both within our own community and beyond it. You have managed to express exactly how I feel about the power of the word. And it's one of the reasons why you are one of my favorite authors. Your ability to connect with me as a reader on a very human level through your characters is almost unparalleled. So my question to you, Jesmyn, is, in spite of everything that's going on, and in spite of the context of the book and the essays contained therein, do you still feel hope? And where from the word is that hope entering your life these days? Where does it come from?
I do still feel hope. And I think part of the reason that I still feel hope is because I still believe in what I said, right, about the power of stories, you know, to inspire empathy and to create community. You know, and I feel like that is what, that belief is what I think drives me in my own work. And I don't know, like, I think that, you know, that we could always use more empathy, right? And I feel like where empathy exists, you know, that it's never a bad thing, right? Like, empathy only leads to, you know, to better, you know, relationships between people, to, you know, to understanding commonality, to bringing people closer together. So yeah, I mean, I still have hope. I still believe in the power of the word. You know, in my life, it's expressed itself, of course, in my novel that I'm working on, which I still feel very tender about and love that character, in part because, as I said, like, I'm writing about an enslaved woman. And so, you know, one thing that I have been thinking about a lot as I've been working on that novel is the power of story, is the power of memory, right? And of telling stories. And this woman, you know, she tells stories to the other people, you know, the other enslaved people that she meets along the way, and that she forms relationships with, and sort of, you know, family units with, right? But there's sometimes she's not able to, you know, communicate with other people. She's not able to speak with them, right? Because, you know, this character in my novel, she's like walking south from South Carolina to be sold in the slave markets of New Orleans. And so sometimes, like, a lot of times, sometimes she's like just telling stories to herself, right? And I feel like that taught me something about the power of story too, right? And that even when you can't share your stories, right, and share your memories, that they still have power, even if you're only sharing them with yourself, like, even if you're only retelling them to yourself, right? That, because I don't know, I just feel like that very action, in a way, is like that my character's way of, like, reconfirming her humanity to herself, and, like, helping her navigate and understand and move through the world around her. And so I don't know, so I think that not only, you know, do I feel like that's, like, true for my character, but I feel like that's true for each of us too, right? Like, you know, that even if we're not sharing our stories, there's power in, you know, in remembering our stories and telling our stories, just to ourselves, because I feel like that sort of broadens our idea of who we are, of who we were, of what we can be. I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're not. No, I'm right there with you. I definitely believe in the intrinsic value of our own individual story. And in the tradition of the griots from West Africa. Their whole life revolved around learning everyone's story in the region, right? And being able to recite it. The importance of being a keeper and a teller of memory is essential to who we are as human beings. Absolutely. I love that. In the book club, one of the things I love is that people are really engaged. They engage with the content. They engage with the words. This is a passage that was highlighted a lot by people in the club. I read Baldwin's essay, Notes of a Native Son, while I was in my mid-20s. This is you speaking. I know you know that that's you. And it was a revelation. I read it voraciously, desperate for the words on the page. I needed to know that someone else saw the myriad injustices of living while Black in this country, that someone so sharp and gifted and human could acknowledge it all and speak on it again and again. How much do you love James Baldwin?
I love him. Like, you know how you have that reading experience when you discover someone's work? You are immediately immersed in it. And it is as if they are looking at you and speaking directly to you and like peering into the depths of your soul. Yes. And in that moment, I don't know, there's this exchange where it's almost as if you're a witness to like the essence of them, like their words have that much power. And in a way, I almost felt like when I was reading Baldwin, that he could see me too. And he was speaking to me, and he could, I don't know, like he was witness to my sort of essence and the things that I have struggled with, and, you know, my hopes and my dreams and my trauma. So I love him. I love his work. And he's just so, I mean, his writing, his prose is just, it's beautiful. Like, it's lyrical, the rhythm of it. But at the same time that the writing itself is beautiful, like his honesty, his frankness, like how frank he is. And then how insightful he is. Like, all of that combined, I feel like it transformed me, because in the process of reading his work, it was as if he enabled me to see the world differently. Like, and it was amazing. So I love him. I love his work.
I went through a similar awakening, right? It was like, it was like I had been seeing the world in black and white. And all of a sudden I put on a pair of glasses called James Baldwin, and I could see in living color. And it was really one of the first times in my life that I felt like an author was speaking directly to me, right? About my experience in life, right? And I found that extraordinary. And he's such a, not only a wordsmith, but a feeling smith, right? he knows how to put it down. Let's talk for a moment about how this collection of essays is in fact a response to his novel, The Fire Next Time.
So I read The Fire Next Time, and, it's a book that is very much, and now it's been a couple of years since I picked it up. I need to return to it again. Because I feel like when I return to a book, I have different, like I learn something new, I see something new, right? Every time I return to a book. But so I read the book, and I just felt like it's a book that's very much of its time, but at the same time that it's a book that's of its time, it also reaches beyond its time, right? To now, right? To, I mean, he's speaking about, what America was like in that moment. But so much of it, I feel like, still applies to our present moment. And so, I don't know. So I think that once that I was working with my editor, Kathy Belden. And so once we sort of figured out how we wanted to structure, this book. And once we began getting submissions in, right? And we, we didn't really give people any direction, and that caused us to actually lose some writers, right? Because we were just saying, just write about, write about what it's like to be Black in America right now. And people were like, what? That's too large. I need focus. And I could not give them any.
Some guide rails, right?
Right. They wanted some guide rails. And I don't know. I wanted to see what people came up with. I wanted just that like super general prompt to sort of help them realize what they've been obsessing about or what they've been sort of thinking about, in the present moment, right, where their interests lie. And then I wanted them to just find that, and explore that and talk about that and bring that to the page. So I feel like, that all like the poems and the essays in the piece, that they really are, or they were attempting, I think, to do the same thing that Baldwin does in his work, right? To mix like this, the sort of lyrical, right, beautiful language, right, and attention to language, right, and creating like an immersive experience for the reader, but at the same time to also, just make strong statements about what it means to, or explore what it means to be a Black person right now, in America. And I don't know, like I feel like one of the things that I love so much about James Baldwin is that his work, and we've talked a little bit about this, his work inspired community, right? I mean, he was part of a whole, sort of generation of artists who was like generating amazing work and having conversation and dialogue, right? And really sort of creating change. And so I was hoping that would also be something that would happen during this process, right? That, that the people that I sort of begged to be a part of this project would also be part of a conversation, and that hopefully, the work would inspire change and inspire a sense of community and inspire a sense of like a collective, this is a collective response to the times, that we're living in, which, as we've all seen, when the book was published and then in the years, since, right, we've all seen that it's,
the need and necessity for a book like this has not gone away.
Right.
And we are grateful, really, truly grateful. So you didn't get much resistance from the writers you approached, except for those who needed more guardrails, right? You picked some powerful voices.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like the writing world is pretty small, and some of the newer writers like Kima Jones and like Smith and Daniel Jose Older, like those are people who I met online on Twitter, right? And like book Twitter, I guess. Like I followed them and when, whenever there would be another incident of police brutality, or, there was just something going on in the culture, right? Like they were constantly saying like really insightful, thoughtful things about it on Twitter, right? And so that's how I sort of, I didn't discover them. Plenty of people already knew about them, but that's how I came to, came to know them. And so I was really excited about getting them to contribute to the collection, right? Because I just felt like, they were, I felt like people needed to hear what they had to say, right? And when Twitter, with Twitter, right, it's 140 characters or 120 characters, I can't remember how much. And in 5 days after someone sends out a tweet, it's like it vanishes, right? No, you don't scroll someone's timeline back 5 days. So I don't know. I just really wanted to create a book where their contributions would remain, right? And they're more permanent, right? And would be more permanent in book form. And then, so people like Jericho Brown, who I had met before and just loved his work, like, I just, Honore, I think her last name is Jeffers. Like, there were so many people, who contributed to the book, who I just respect and like love their work so much that I wanted them to take part in it. So I don't know. So I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity, to get so many, great writers to be a part of it. And a lot of them have had, it feels like this really, and there's that Time magazine issue where they're talking about like, is this like the second like Black Renaissance art, right? And it feels like that. It really does, right? Because that was before Jericho Brown had won the Pulitzer. That was, before like Honore, she just came out with her first novel. It's chosen for Oprah's book club, and everyone is saying it's an amazing book, right? So I don't know. I just feel really lucky to have had I feel really lucky to produce art now, and then also be in conversation and to be part of a collective, of Black artists who are producing amazing work right now.
Did you enjoy the editorial hat? Did you enjoy being the editor?
Well, it does not, that kind of work does not come naturally to me. Because it's very easy for me to sink into a piece of work, a piece of literature, and sort of lose my critical, my capacity to criticize it, right? Especially if the language is beautiful, right? You can totally bewitch me, with the language, and then I'm just like, well, that's perfect. I love it. So it takes much more, bandwidth for me to be like conscious and critical and sort of read with an eye to, okay, so what can be improved on in this, or where could we have more clarification, or what could be developed here? But most of the articles, and of course the poems, like I didn't even, did nothing to the poetry. But most of the essays were just, they were so phenomenal, by the time that they came to me, that they didn't really require any work at all. So I actually, I'm a guest editor for the Best American Short Stories that's coming out, like for this past year, I think, like the 2022 edition. I think the one that will come out in 2022. Right. That so, and that was.
So is this widely known? I had not heard that yet.
No, it's coming. I've forgotten the pub date, but it's coming out like fairly soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the second time that I've sort of worn an editor's hat. But again, it's funny because even like with those stories, I just sort of chose them. For me, editing is more about like finding the work that you love and gathering it all in one place.
Right? Or curating, right? Yeah. Exercising your taste.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So in that respect, it's an enjoyable endeavor.
Yeah. Here we go. Here's another question.
Okay.
In the book club, Cornelius and Kelly highlighted this passage from Isabel Wilkerson's essay. Okay. We seem to be in a continuing feedback loop of repeating a past that our country has yet to address. Our history is one of spectacular achievement, as in Black senators of the Reconstruction era, or the advances that culminated in the election of Barack Obama, followed by a violent backlash that threatens to erase the gains, and then a long, slow climb to the next mountain where the cycle begins again. And it just keeps repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating itself. Even these past few days, watching the imagery coming from Afghanistan and recognizing this pattern that we have been in terms of our foreign policy. And, I'm old enough to remember the Vietnam War, missed the draft by that much, and the end of that conflict. And here we are yet again. It does not seem like America as a nation, as a country, as a culture, has the ability to take advantage of memory. And I want your opinion on this, but I feel like it is because we are disconnected from the truth about our story. So how can you remember something that you are trying to alter in real time to avoid the story?
Right.
Claim,
yeah, it's madness.
It is madness. It is madness, and we do it at every juncture in terms of our history as a nation. It is exactly that. It is maddening. So we are in yet another cycle, right? Of climbing this mountain again. And I believe that stories and storytelling have something to offer us in this moment, and I've come up with a theory that I am trying to put into practice. I'm gonna try and test this theory out, because I believe so much in the power of storytelling that I believe that it does indeed have something for us in this now moment in America. Because I believe that if I can sit long enough with a person with whom I have little or nothing in common, but if I can sit in the presence of that person long enough to hear their story and for them to hear mine, then we will find commonality in our stories. And if we have commonality, then there's the basis for understanding. And if we have understanding, we're just a smidge away from empathy.
Right.
And it is empathy, I think, that our conversations are really lacking in America today, especially around who we are and who we are to one another, right? So I'm looking to take this theory and put it on the road, and have some difficult conversations. But I believe that we have to have the courage to have these conversations, and that's why writing like yours and the book Fire This Time are so important for us as ammunition, as fodder, as inspiration, right? To buck us up, right? Remind us of the truth and give us the courage to go out there, because we know we are, by the virtue of the word, we're a part of a community, right? And that the community not only has meaning, it has righteous purpose in its existence. And that's all that is required. Just us being is enough, right? So Isabel was on it, all over it. It was very, very powerful, very powerful. Wendy Walter's essay was also powerful. And Padma and Thomas and Felicia and all kinds of people really talked about this quote from Wendy Walter's essay. Empathy these days is hard to come by. Maybe this is because everyone is having such a hard time being understood themselves. Wow. Insight, revelation, right? I get that. I get that. We're all feeling like we're not being seen or heard or understood. And that's everybody, right? No matter what stripe you are. We all have that in common. Again, we have these things in common. They should be the basis of coming together, not necessarily drawing us further apart. She goes on to say, or because empathy requires us to dig way down into the murk deeper than our own feelings go, to a place where the boundaries between our experiences and everyone else's no longer exist. That's doing the hard work, right?
Right, because it's hard to feel, especially when other people are experiencing trauma, when other people are experiencing difficulty, you know, when other people are experiencing, you know, hardship. Like it's hard to, as you were saying, like not only like experience that in your own life, but I don't know, but sort of open yourself to the understanding and to the reality that you know, that these people who you may not have anything in common with, who may be nothing like you, who may be, you know, from all the way halfway around the world, right? That they're also suffering the same trauma, right? They're also suffering, you know, suffering the same trauma and sometimes even worse trauma, right? They're also, but at the same time, right? It makes you realize, or you can realize, I think through art will help you realize that not only, you know, do we all suffer from trauma, right? And hardship and the terrible things, but then there's tenderness, and then there's, you know, there's like, you know, there's wanting comfort, and there's, you know, friendship, and there's, you know, there you know, romantic relationships, and then there's, you know, just the quiet satisfaction of, I don't know, sitting in a sunny place on a nice day and, you know, drinking a cup of tea, or right, or having a, you know, I don't know, like a
simple pleasure.
Right, there's simple pleasures, right? And I think that, you know, it's easier for us to, you know, to have blinders on, right? And to just really sort of focus, not even on, you know, the deeper, I don't know, like emotional truths of our own life, but just have blinders on and just focus on like the surface.
Yeah.
You know, the surface, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to take those blinders off, you know, pay attention to whatever you have like the reality of your, you know, emotional life, of your own individual emotional life, but then also to think about, okay, just as I am, you know, this is who I am, and this is what I am, you know, dealing with and struggling with and living through, right? There are all these people, you know, who everyone, right? I mean, everyone is doing the best that they can with what they've been given, right? And I just think it's difficult for people to understand that. But I really do believe that, you know, that's part of the power of art. It's one of the things that art makes us realize again and again, right?
It brings that opportunity into our lives, right? To see ourselves in others, right? Especially literature, literature. You know, I think we're gonna take a few questions, but there's one topic that I wanted to bring up with you, if you don't mind, because my experience of you is that you write so elegantly about people who are going through trauma, right? And my experience of you is that you are adept at not only communicating the depth of trauma, but also the flip side, the redemption that is available to us in recovery, right? And I know that that your beloved, your husband, passed away right before COVID began. And on top of 2020, this has just been a really, really tough year. And my experience of you, Jesmyn, is as a woman that possesses enormous strength, right? And otherwise, I don't know that you could write that in your characters. You have to have that inside of you in order to be able to share that with an audience, right? And so talk to me just a little bit, if you don't mind, about the need and necessity for resilience in the human species.
Right. I mean, I just, you know, that it's easier for me to think about that the aspects of that question and to answer that question, when I start with my family, you know, and like in the stories that I've heard about, not only what I saw when I was a child, right? But then the stories that I heard, like that my grandmother told me when I was a kid, right? That she would tell me, that my great grandmother would tell me about what life was like for them when, you know, they were young. I mean, all of my people on both sides, my mom and my dad's side, are from rural Mississippi, right? And so life was really hard for them, right? And so they would just tell me these, you know, stories about what it was like to, say, like, live through Hurricane Camille, right, in 1969. Or they'd tell me stories about, because there were several people in my family who were bootleggers, you know, back in the 30s and 40s, right? So they would tell me stories about, and one of them, my great grandfather, was like shot and killed by revenue agents who were looking for their illegal liquor stills that they had back in the woods, right? So you know, and those are just some of the stories that people in my family have shared with me, you know, about trauma and about hardship and about what life was like for them. But I think in the telling of their stories, and also in what I saw and understood of their lives and of how they lived their lives, like, I begin to realize that you're not that your trauma does not define you. Mm-hmm. and that so many of the people in my family and the people in my community have endured trauma, you know, over decades, right? But
generations,
right? But then they survive and they thrive in spite of it, you know, in different ways. I mean, sometimes the coping may not be so healthy, right? Their methods of coping with what they're going through sometimes are not so healthy.
There's coping, and then there's coping.
Right. But they make it, you know, there's some healthy coping that they also do, and they, you know, and they pull together and they remember and they pass those stories down, and you know, and like I said, like they provide, I feel like they provide and have provided like a model for me, so that now, as I'm like living the life that I'm living and experiencing the things that I'm experiencing, I look to them as an example of how you thrive in spite of trauma, right? And I just, it's very important to me to have that truth evident in my work, and to like make my work sort of reflect that reality, because I feel like if I only sort of, you know, wrote about the trauma and explored the trauma, but then didn't write about the flip side of it, then to me that's horror, and that's not the kind of writing that I am interested in producing, right? That's not the kind of art that I'm interested in making. So for me, it's always important to reflect the fact that people survive because they have hope. You know, they have hope that, you know, that they'll live their way to a better tomorrow, right? That they will thrive in spite of the things that they have endured, that they will, you know, find solace in their community, that they'll find solace in their family, both like blood and found. Yes. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a very important aspect of my work. And I know it makes my work harder to read sometimes. I get that sometimes from readers who are like, I just couldn't, it was too hard, it was too intense, too rough. But
let me say this about that. It's true. It is difficult to get through some of it. And I've never had an experience reading you, Jesmyn, where at the end, I wasn't uplifted, where I did not feel that journey added value to my life, that I learned something, that I grew, that I discovered something in myself through one of your characters. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you keep doing you, and we will keep reading because the gift that you bring is essential to who we are. And it is a balm on this journey.
Thank you.
Called life.
Thank you.
You want to take a couple questions before we pop off? Yeah. Right. At this time, yes, Padmasree, there you are, right on time.
Well, thank you so much. The audience has been super engaged, by the way. They've been amazing comments being posted in chat. I will just read, somebody just said, anyone else want to give a standing ovation? So if this was a real live event, you would have both gotten a standing ovation. So yeah, there were a few questions posted here. Let me pick a couple. Jesmyn, this one is from Laranda Crosby Johnson. She's asking, even as you share and tell our trauma in such a way that is honoring and liberating, how do you care for yourself as you bring these stories forward?
Great question.
That is a good question. I mean, I read work that feeds me, right? So I actually just finished reading Brandon Hobson's The Removed, and that was, you know, a really beautiful, just a really beautiful book, right? That also written by an author who also is sort of wrestling with trauma and the after effects of trauma in his work.
Removed. You said the Removed by Hobson. Yes.
By Brandon Hobson.
Okay, write that down, y'all.
I read that, but then at the same, I read work like that, right? And I've also been reading a lot of poetry lately. I think the poet's name is Dorian Lux. I've been reading a lot of work, her work lately. So also Ada Limon, I love her poetry. So I've been reading a lot of poetry because I feel like poetry often does that for me. Just, I don't know, it sort of takes me up out of myself. It's also, you know, can be like wrestling with very weighty issues. But every time I read a poem, I'm convinced that there is beauty and that there is goodness in divinity in the world. So I read a lot of poetry, but then I also read a lot of fluffy stuff. I love romance novels.
Yes.
Yes, I love romance novels. And so I have actually been reading like a ton of romance novels. And let's see, what else? I like YA too. So I'll just, you know, sort of random YA books and read them. I just read Naomi Novik, I think her name is. It's a YA book called A Deadly Education, which was just totally enjoyable and, you know, cool. And I also watch TV. Some writers tell you that they don't watch TV, and they don't. I am a writer who watches TV. I like watching TV.
There's some really amazing storytelling happening on TV these days. I mean, amazing storytelling.
Right. Like last year during 2020, I loved, or it was 2019, 2020, I loved Watchmen with Regina King.
Yes, right.
And then just last year in 2020, I really loved, what was it? The one with Journey Smollett,
yes. I know what you're talking about.
Right. And it was amazing, right?
Yeah.
The one was like set in the 50s, and, you know, so it's this mix of sort of like supernatural and horror and sci-fi and I don't know.
Civil rights. Yeah, it was all in there. It was all in there.
Yeah. I love the series. So I do that. And then I've been trying to, you know, COVID has really scared me, and I've been trying to take care of myself, you know, because I'm my kids, like my kids only have one parent who's still here, right? And so that has, I think, made me more committed to taking care of myself. And so I've been sort of working out pretty regularly since fall of last year. So I'll work out like 3 to 4 times a week, and just like, you know, getting kicked, because basically what what a workout does for me is it just kicks me out of my head. Like I can't do something in my head because I'm just focusing on like breathing and, and continuing to move whatever I'm moving. So I do that too, and that helps as far as like
We have to put on our own life vest first, right?
Right.
Before you turn to help anybody else.
Right.
Lovecraft country. Lovecraft country.
Woo!
There it was.
People are commenting as you guys are talking, by the way, a lot of kudos. I won't have time to read all the messages, but we'll try to capture some of them and send it your way. But a couple of suggestions here, Jesmyn, for you. One suggestion is, Ms. Ward, would you ever consider writing a book like The Fire This Time for Children, a collection of stories meant to help children become uplifted and empowered? And along those lines, another participant is suggesting, would you update this essay collection periodically, like every 10 years? Would you issue a second collection? So some ideas for you as you think about your books and your writing.
Thank you for those. Yeah, those are really good. I hadn't thought about either of those, but yeah, those are good ideas. I'm gonna write them down.
You don't have a children's book yet.
So I'm under contract to write one once I'm done with the novel that I'm working on right now. So.
All right. So the novel, children's book,
right,
screenplay.
Yeah, right.
And collection number 2 updated after a few years. Okay, we're almost at time. LeVar, do you have time to take one question? Maybe I think this one is.
Sure, I'll take one.
Okay, so this one may be for both of you. Megan is asking, I work with young people, particularly young women. Do either of you have suggestions about how to inspire empathy and understanding in young people and encourage them to engage in dialogue with each other and to work on lifting each other up?
I'll take a stab at it, Jesmyn. Be the example. Right? Show empathy in your dynamic with her or them, and they will pick up on it immediately. If you demonstrate that this is how human beings in a healthy relationship communicate, deal with one another from a place of empathy and compassion, then that will become a part of their emotional vocabulary as well. I don't think that we can. I don't think there's a test you can take, or there's no outside way to learn what is an inside job. Empathy springs from the inside out, and so that's behavior that needs to be demonstrated so that it can be inculcated and then replicated, duplicated.
I mean, I think that's a really great answer. It's something that I think about a lot, actually, because there were some adults in my life, I feel like, when I was a child who did interact with me in that way, right? Who sort of acknowledged that I was a person with my own thoughts and ideas and dreams and hopes and, little tragedies, et cetera. And modeled empathy for me in like their interactions with me, right? But that it wasn't all, there were some, but every adult in my life when I was a child did not. And so that's why I think that, that what LeVar is saying is really important, right? That adults, should model that kind of, should model it for children. And that's a way to sort of teach them how to use empathy in their lives and how to interact with each other, while like being aware of
how we pass these values on to the next generation.
Right.
How it's always been.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. I want to be respectful of both your time. So thank you very much for joining us today. What an amazing conversation. We could go on and listen to both of you talk. We are recording the session and we'll have it up on our website very shortly with a transcript and with your book recommendations, Jesmyn and LeVar, as you're discussing it. Actually gave me an idea to start a Jesmyn Ward book club and read all of your books together. Maybe we can have one of your super readers from LeVar's club moderate that as well.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and look forward to reading more from you and reading with you, LeVar.
Padma, just let me say in closing, Jesmyn, thank you so much for granting us the gift of your time, your presence, your energy. You know how much I love you. You are one of my favorite writers on the planet, and any opportunity to be in communion with you and your work is a joy for me. Just a reminder to y'all in the book club, next up is James McBride's Deacon King Kong. I cannot wait to get into this with y'all. This is a great summer read. I know we're at the end of summer, but we're going to extend summer just a little bit with a great summer read for our next book. And in the meantime and in between time, we will see you all next time, but you don't have to take my word for it. Peace and blessings, y'all. Have a great evening. Jesmyn, I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Bye, everyone. See you next time.